Hello, I'm Suni Sevilla Haru, and this is May 29th, the year 2001. We're here today for the Legacy Program of the Screen Actors Guild Foundation. And with me is a wonderful woman, Janet MacLachlan, a multifaceted actor and a very busy woman. Janet, how are you?
I'm good, Sumi. How are you?
So you were born and raised in New York City.
Yes.
You went to elementary school where?
In Harlem, and junior high school in Harlem. And I went to Julia Richmond High School, which was a exam-based entry high school in downtown Manhattan, which was my first real experience outside of Harlem. And then I went to Hunter College.
So at Hunter College, you got a degree in child psychology.
Exactly.
Where did the artist in Janet MacLachlan happen?
I have no idea. Let me see. I don't really know, quite frankly. I think somewhere in my teens, while I was in college, I was introduced to a group of actors in a community theater setting. And I did a play. I did a couple of plays with them.
This was while you were in college?
While I was in college. And then after, I think my last year at college, I took theater. But my primary goal in college was to become a child psychologist. And somewhere in my junior year, I realized that was not what I wanted to do. And because I had always been working part-time, I thought, well, maybe what I should do is take some business courses so that when I graduate, I'll have something real to go to, and they wouldn't let me change my major. And so at that point, I just said, well, forget it. I'm just going to finish, and I'll figure out what I'm going to do later. You know, it's the kind of thing that happens to every teenager in college. It was just not very much spoken of nor dealt with. And so going to this little theater group was a way of keeping me interested in something. Okay. And so when I graduated, I started taking professional acting classes.
Somewhere along the way, you must have told your family or revealed to them that you were going to become an actor?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
No. I actually got a series of jobs as secretary, Girl Friday, executive secretary. You remember those old classifications, and was sort of moving up in that arena. And the theater was a pastime. It was just something that I didn't have to tell my parents about because I wasn't living with them. Which was the wonderful thing. And taking those professional classes at Herbert Berghoff, and still didn't prepare me for the fact that I was going to make this a life choice. That happened very accidentally when I had taken my first trip to Europe and came back and realized there's something else happening in life and I've got to be a part of it, and had to go back to this job. I thought, I've got to find a theater company that I can work with and to allow this to happen. And I was taken to the taping of a television show where I met some black actors, and one of them was the stage manager of The Blacks. And he said, come on down and see The Blacks. I hadn't seen it. And I went down, and he said, would you like to understudy? He gave me the script. He says, why don't you study the script, come every Sunday, and we'll see about having you audition for understudy. And so that's how that happened. Then in meeting all of these actors, I was also introduced to the whole world of how you get jobs, how you make auditions, what all of that was about. And I auditioned for another play that was getting ready to open, Moon on a Rainbow Shawl, off Broadway. And I was offered that understudy job. I was understudying Cicely. and Cicely was starring in the play with James Earl Jones. And so I took that job as an understudy, and I went back to the Blacks and told the stage manager, hey, I've got this job. He said, well, hold on, I'll get you this job too. So I ended up getting 2 understudy jobs for a total of, I think I was getting paid for one of them, $5 a day. And I went and quit my job. And I said, this is something that I have to pursue.
You were living on $5 a day?
$5
Each.
a week on one job. The other job was the Blacks didn't pay. Moon on a Rainbow Shawl, because it was produced by a Broadway producer. They paid $5 for rehearsal pay.
Now, did you ever, at this point, break it to your family that you were bringing in
no money?
this-
Well, yes. I think I told them what I was doing. I don't think I told them the implications. It's when I discovered unemployment, and I realized that I could just about manage it. And at that time, let me see. This was 62. This was 1962, and there was an organization called the Committee for the Employment of Negro Performers that was protesting the fact that that black actors were not being seen for most Broadway shows. I Can Get It For You Wholesale in particular. A lot of the shows, Broadway musicals that were based in New York that had no blacks in the chorus and no black actors anywhere. And we were a protest group that was meeting regularly, and we decided to stage a picket line. And I was doing picket line duty, and I went to relieve the actress that I was understudying in the Blacks. And she said that she had been walking. She was also the line captain. She could not make the performance that day, that afternoon. And it was a Saturday, and there were 2 back-to-back performances. And she said, you'd better get down to the theater. So I flew down to the theater. They had to try to costume me. I had never been fully rehearsed. There was a lot of blocking I didn't know. And I went into the show, and everybody was extremely helpful. Lou Gossett and Roscoe Lee Brown. I mean, just everybody that I know now, that's where I met them. And because, unfortunately, the actress decided to come down and see how I was doing, the producer fired her, and I ended up taking over the role. So it was one of those,
Well, you
happened
started
to be
out.
at the right place at the right time.
You started out big time. You started with the stars.
I did, and I started out in a hit show that Cicely had won the Obie for. So had James Earl, and they had left that show, and they were now opening another show that I was understudying, and I went into this one, and because I was with Lonnie Elder and Robert Hooks and all of those seasoned actors, they taught me the ropes, and they mentored me. They told me how to do this and how to find an agent, how to make auditions, what it was I should be doing. And the CENP had prepared lists of black actors and submitted them to the Tyrone Guthrie Theater that was getting ready to open in Minneapolis, and to Lincoln Center that was just opening and was starting a repertory company. And so because my name was on the list, and of course everybody on the list was called, I auditioned for them both, and Guthrie hired me. And so I went to Minneapolis for a year. I mean, in between the time that I took over in the Blacks, I did an off-Broadway show. It was a spoof on Raisin in the Sun called Raising Hell in the Sun, and I got my equity card from that. And then I did a Broadway show. I had a little part in a Broadway show that didn't last long. Then I went to Minneapolis. When I came back from Minneapolis, I was invited back for a second season. And when I went back, I realized I had less to do than in the first season. And I finally confronted the company manager, and I said, was I hired to balance off Graham Brown, who was hired to play Horatio? And he said yes. And I said, that's not right, and I have to figure out what I'm going to do about this, you know? And if I don't come back, will you hire another black actress, a new black actress, to come in and at least have this experience? And he said, not necessarily. Because Graham and I were the only two black actors in the company. That was not just the company from New York, but a lot of the graduate theater students from Minneapolis. So, but I went back for the second season, realized I had less to do than some of the graduate interns. And so I left. I left. I remember having to go to Dr. Guthrie and tell him that I wanted to quit. And it was very painful.
For him or for you?
For me. I mean, I cried the entire time.
Oh,
it was
no.
terrible. And I had made really good friends in Minneapolis, and Ellen Gear was a good friend of mine, and I remember going to her and sort of telling her what I wanted to do. And she was married at the time to Ed Flanders, and Hume and Jesse were the stars of the company, and Rita Gam. And I mean, it was an amazing experience. You know, Zoe Caldwell, I met Zoe Caldwell there. And, but I knew I couldn't stand it, and I thought maybe I would just go back to New York and see what was going to be available there. And I came back to New York, and the interesting thing is that I was told on most of my auditions that I was overqualified. I had more credits than I had actually had experience. I mean, let's face it, I had literally been a professional actress for a year.
What was the subtext when they were telling you you were overqualified?
The subtext was they had really nothing for me to do, except that even for those roles where they were casting a black actress, okay, they didn't want to consider me for minor roles or understudies because I had just come from Guthrie. I had done a Broadway show. I had all of these credits racked up in such a very short period of time and not any real experience, you know? I really also don't consider it. Plus, I didn't have any real reviews in New York. I didn't have all of that, you know, going for me. And so I had an agent who set up a meeting for me with the head of casting of talent in New York for Universal. And they sent me out here to test for a contract. In the meantime, I had managed to pick up some AFTRA jobs and then a SAG job.
What was your first SAG job?
Naked City. My first on-camera speaking role. The interesting thing is, because I did not have that much actual stage experience, the making the adjustment to camera was not so difficult for me. It was difficult, but it wasn't that bad. I think there was another show in New York called The Reporters. I do believe I did a second show, a second SAG show. I did a whole series of first ever black commercials for television. And Universal picked me up.
Let's
for a
talk
contract.
about this, about being a contract player.
Yes.
Contracts,
A contract player.
Players, it was going out at this time.
It was gone. It was over.
What year was this now?
This was 1964.
And they put you on contract.
They put me under a 7-year contract.
An African-American woman.
Yes. There was a black actor under contract to Universal. Very lonely, extremely lonely. There were 2 other black actresses under contract. One was to NBC, I believe. And one, I believe, was to another studio.
To what do you attribute that? There were flocks of African-American actresses in Hollywood, yet they brought you from New York.
I have no idea. I really don't know what that was about. And I was really so naive about things politically, or how things worked. I didn't pay very much attention to it. You know what I mean? I was not that conscious. The CENP was the first conscious raising organization that I was a part of. And it made me look at things that I had just taken for granted in a very different way. I think because I did not have any of that grounding in my family, there was no grounding about my pride in being black. As a matter of fact, there was a lot of opposite training going on. Because I went to essentially an all-white high school, I had a couple of black friends in high school, and Hunter, there was a small group of black women, and I had in fact pledged a black sorority, but I was, all I can say is I was unconscious. It didn't occur to me that many of the places where I went for these little part-time jobs, I was the only black person there. It didn't occur to me that the way people looked at me or talked to me or said things like, if they met me for the first time after talking to me on the phone, I didn't know you were colored. They were colored was a Negro. And I kind of learned to not react. But it wasn't for any conscious reason. It was just that. So when I was invited to Minneapolis, and the reality hit me when I got there, you know, it wasn't as if I was not used to being the only black person in the room. I was.
When you were under contract with Universal, what kind of roles were they giving you?
I think the first show that they put me in was a very small role in an Alfred Hitchcock Presents, because the man who was directing it had directed me in my test, and he wanted me in this show. So that was the first show I did. I then went to Monique and I said, well, you know, what do I do now? I mean, are there classes? Where do I go? And she said to me, do nothing.
Now, this is not like the old studio system.
Change nothing. I said, well, should I show up at the studio, you know, on a regular basis? Can I just go and wander around and sort of get used to, no, you don't, we'll call you, that kind of thing. And I, in fact, asked her, well, who's the best teacher in town? We're not going to recommend, don't do anything, don't go anywhere, don't do anything. Just enjoy yourself, get used to Los Angeles, go out to the beach, have friends. Well, it was like a license to play. Do you know?
So this was not like the old studio days
No.
where they told you what to wear, how to do your hair.
Exactly. And where you
whom to
showed up
date.
at the studio every morning at 9 and you had a whole day of classes and what have you. I would have loved that.
But instead you became a Hollywood party girl?
I became a Hollywood party
No.
girl. Oh yeah. Hello. There was nothing else to do. I didn't know that many actors or directors that I could just go visit. Do you know? So I didn't know how to, and I wasn't pushy. So I didn't know how to, that's what I mean when I say I didn't have a mentor who would tell me how to use this entree to the studio, how to, you know, force something for my career. They did assign me to a publicist, a black publicist at the studio. And so we did some publicity picture things and stuff. And they did assign me to, this was way before Universal had the tourist city, the tour center. So the tours were actually on the lot, and there were trams or they were walking tours. Do you know what I mean? So the old Jack Benny stage, which is stage 1, I believe, on the lot, was still set up for as a like a sitcom stage. Do you know? There was like this. There were audience seats and a stage. So the studio developed a show for the tourists, and it was a fashion show. And they pulled about 6 or 7 of the contract players and fitted us with very famous costumes, and we did this show. It was like vaudeville. We did like 6 shows a day. Do you know what I mean? We did it for a week. That was one of my assignments. The other one of my assignments was when the affiliates came into town and were being entertained at the studio, they invited some of the contract actresses. Now I'll show you how stupid I was. I didn't get it. I really did not get what that was about. I really didn't get how misogynist that was. I just showed up at this cocktail party.
Dressed how?
Dressed, you know, I mean, I wasn't told how to dress. And I wasn't told to dress provocatively, nor was I told to make any particular kind of relationships. I was just told to show up and, you know, sort of mingle. And so that's what I did. I would show up and mingle. And I think I overstepped my invisible boundaries at some point or another, because I was never invited back again. I
dear.
I think I went
Do you
to
know what you
3 of
did?
them. I think I just opened my mouth about how, you know, unhappy I was, because I was not happy. And I wasn't invited back to any of those events. Now, I was given two other assignments. One was a co-starring role in another Alfred Hitchcock, and a co-starring role in a Bob Hope Chrysler Theater, and they loaned me out to the FBI.
Were you developing a network of actors and mentors for yourself?
I was getting to meet more actors and developing some friendships with other actors under contract, but not necessarily a mentor, not in the same way that Robert and functioned for me in New York. Nobody was really giving me any wise advice or explaining to me how the system worked or any of that. It was mostly we were partying. I mean,
I can't picture Janet MacLachlan as a party girl.
That's all we did. I mean, there was really nothing else. The rain check room was really popular.
That.
And it became like my home away from home. Which is where I met a lot of the working actors and where I would get into big arguments because there was very much a West Coast, East Coast division. And I was an East Coast intruder.
Ooh.
Really. So there was a lot of that bias set up among the actors. Do you know what I'm saying?
I remember that.
You do
I remember
that
because I was a West Coast kid and therefore couldn't act. But the people from the East Coast were actors, real actors.
Is that what that was about?
Uh-huh.
I never really got to know what it was about. all I knew was that people were rude to me, or dissed me, or whatever, and so I just gravitated to the people that I got along with, and it became a very non-political kind of situation. If you were going to give me a problem because I came from New York and was under contract, and you were angry that I had a contract, I wasn't going to spend any time with you. I was going to go to spend time with this person who really didn't care where I came from and who knew where the great parties were.
So how in the world did you ever get around to doing Sounder?
Well, I did in fact find a couple of theater workshops.
Oh.
And I did start working with some workshop groups and doing scenes and studying, and I did become a part of the Actor Studio West when it was developing.
Weren't you a founder?
Oh, I wasn't a founder because I had not been a member in New York.
Oh.
But Raymond St. Jacques, who was a friend of mine from New York and was a member, brought me into the new groups that were founding the Actor Studio West, and I became very involved with that, and started studying there. But of course, I was signed in November of '64. In November of '65, I wanted out, and Universal said, no, can't do that. I remember it by mid-year of '66, they dropped me because there were they had two options a year to either pick up my contract or give me, that was the thing. They didn't want to give me my raise, my contractual raise at the end of the first year. That's what it was. And I said, well, I don't want to be here. Okay. And
were you giving any thought to how you were going to make a living?
No, you know something? I have never worried about that, ever.
Oh, that's how it works.
It never, ever became a problem or an issue or something that I had to worry about. Even after they dropped me and I realized that, and I spent up what money I had managed to save, I went to unemployment. I came to SAG and I got some assistance, which I paid back. I went to my agent at the time and I got a little part-time job answering the phones for him. I never thought that I would never be able to survive, ever. And I always realized that this was temporary.
But there must be then a confidence that's read in that being, just never worrying. So when you go into a casting office, you're not worried about getting this job or not, or were you?
Right. No, I wasn't. I think the only time that I had to really think about it was I did not work for a year after they dropped me, for a whole year. And I auditioned for Gordon when he was starting up the company at the Mark Taper. And I auditioned for I Spy, which had they? I believed I auditioned for them before they hit the air. They were getting ready to do their second season because they used to get a group of shows together based in a certain geographical location, and they would go on location for 3 or 4 months or something like that. So the show had not aired yet, and I auditioned for their second season.
So this is 1967.
This is 68, 67, 68.
Where you played Laya. Tell us about the character Laya.
Laya was the daughter of an African minister or leader of some sort who was working in a government foreign office and in Greece, in Athens.
Is that where you were on location?
And that's where I was on location.
Oh, tough, Janet.
I know, it was awful. It was so hard. But between the time that I had auditioned for the show and the time that they cast me for the show, there was a very long, ultra long wait for the answer because the company was out at a different location. They had to come back, and there was a lot of stuff going on. In the meantime, I was offered a role at the Mark Taper for their opening play. And I had to decide because I was told, this is how naive I was told that if you take this role, you may not leave it for a movie or a television show. There were those strictures, put on. Gordon Davidson wanted this to be a theater company because at the time, remember, Los Angeles had a really bad theater rep. It was it was a
no theater in
bad
Los
theater
Angeles.
rep, and Gordon wanted to start a theater company that was meaningful, and I understood that. So he offered me what was the play? It was I can't remember, but. So I had to make up my mind whether I was going to take that role or whether I was going to wait for word on I Spy. And I decided to wait for word on I Spy. And I turned down the play. The timing was such. And so I was really very relieved when I got the role. And getting that role really jump-started my whole television career in town because the show was a huge hit by the time my episode aired, and Kaz was a huge star, and this was really a huge part. It was a love interest, and I don't know, I've read since that it may have been the first time that an African-American couple kissed. There was some, in some book.
You've made history then.
They said I made history. I'm not sure if that's really true or not because, as I said, it wasn't the kind of thing that I was paying attention to. But it certainly did open doors for me to all of the other television shows. Also, I came here in 64. In 65, the Watts riots happened. I mean, when they happened, I didn't even know where Watts was. I hadn't been there that long, and I did not know where it was. I did get involved with some of the after programs. There were so many programs cropping up at the time to placate the black community that was really in an outrage. Everybody was pretty terrified, and so I did some of the the workshops and the community programs and blah-de-da-de-da. But, and of course, they lasted for a period of time and then they were over. But the television programmers began adding black actors, black actresses to the cast as co-stars. Shows were being written about the black civil rights struggle.
Were you now becoming political and knowing your place in the industry?
Yeah, I was, but I think maybe I just didn't feel that I was in the trenches. Mm-hmm. And I think I felt that because I wasn't in the trenches that I wasn't really serious.
Or that maybe people wouldn't perceive you to be serious.
They weren't perceiving me as being serious, and that I could not take myself seriously in terms of how much was I participating in the real issues, in the real struggle. And I felt that I wasn't. I felt that I was kind of, dancing on the sidelines.
I had that same experience, having grown up in a pretty white community and sort of living a rather charmed life. Yeah. And I didn't struggle like others had struggled. So right. I had that same thing.
And it does have a lot to do with having struggled. I did not have that growing up. It was not made a part of my consciousness growing up. I don't consider that my life was in any way deprived, disadvantaged, or even hard. Do you know? I think I feel as if I've had an extraordinarily charmed life. And so I don't think that I had enough of the hard times to appreciate the good times. Do you know? You know what they say about having to pay your dues?
Yes.
Well, I hadn't really paid my dues.
But now you have.
But, I think I have.
Now you have.
I think I have. At least now I'm beginning to look at it from a different perspective and realizing, oh my gosh, I was so naive, trusting, that I could have done a lot more for myself or done a lot more for any cause that I might have been interested in.
So what in the world possessed you to become a member of the Screen Actors Guild board?
It was Norma.
About Norma Connolly. Who is Norma?
Who is Norma Connolly? Norma Connolly was a friend of mine from the Actors Studio. She and her husband, Howard Rodman, the writer, were members, and we had become friends. And they were East Coast people, and I was in East Coast, and we sort of had that going. And when Norma got on the board for Kathleen Nolan's first term, Norma and I used to meet at the health club. And she said, listen, Kathleen's just appointed me chair of a new committee called the Women's Conference Committee that she had been working with before she took over the presidency. And she said, I really need an ethnic face on this committee. Would you join the committee? And I said, well, she said, would you at least come and sit in on a meeting? I said, oh, okay. So I went, little did I know. I sat in on a meeting and I began listening, a couple of meetings maybe, and I began listening to what some of the issues were, and there was not an enormous amount of attention being paid to the issues of women in the business and the lack of access, the lack of roles, the difference in money, the kind of treatment. And it sounded so familiar to me because it's the same issues that we were having as black actors in the industry, not having enough roles, being treated, all of that, not having access. And I found out that there was, what were you called at the time?
We were then called the Ethnic Minorities Committee.
The Ethnic Minorities Committee. And Norma said that Suni Haru is chairing the Ethnic Minorities Committee and you should meet her. And I did, and I came and sat in with you on a meeting, and I began to hear the same arguments and issues, but I also began, because we talked about it, began to be aware of the fact that if the issues of white women and black men were going to be addressed, what was going to happen to ethnic women? They were being left out of both committees. And at that time, I think we talked about, well, let's meet with Norma and let's see how we can hook something up and maybe make some real difference or make some inroads into this issue and this problem. Because mostly, I think we were concerned about the effect on women, because we were just left out altogether. And so we hooked up with Norma and we became
a triumvirate.
A troika?
Troika? Yes, that's good.
The three witches?
We were very powerful. We were very powerful, the three of us.
We really carved out a real issue and made people very aware of the fact that it was, in fact, an issue.
But working with the two committees,
we got a lot of, two committees who were very suspicious of each other to begin with.
True.
We got them working together on joint projects and got a lot of new insights and information and enlightenment happening. We had protest marches, we had joint meetings. Do you remember
our trying to monitor television?
Yeah,
and how unsuccessful we are doing it ourselves?
I remember being at your house while we were trying to count faces and ethnic identities and male, female, what have you, and how many lines, and we had this whole thing set up.
Oh, that's where we got the Annenberg study done of women and minorities in television.
Yes.
And we did a press conference.
Yes.
I also remember that we stayed at the Waldorf Astoria.
Yes.
And this is my first time in New York, and you had a room that had no window pane. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that, but it sounds like it probably was because
it was snowing.
No window pane?
Yeah, they had to switch rooms. It was a window, but there was no glass in it.
Oh my God! What that made me remember is that it was the same year, I think, that we went to East Germany.
Yes.
And I remember checking into the hotel in East Berlin, and the room was about the size of this chair, and I had all this luggage that I'd been hanging around, and I couldn't get the window open, and I had a panic attack. And I went screaming down into the lobby to say, I cannot open my window, I need to have air.
Why were we in East Germany?
Well, we were in East Germany because we were a couple of the favorites of John Randolph. John handpicked a group of his favorite people, his favorite actors, to go on a junket, an unofficial cultural tour of East Germany under the sponsorship of an organization that he was a part of, the GDR Friendship
Society, I think.
Friendship Society.
Mm-hmm. Who was with us?
Okay, I remember you. I remember George Stanford Brown and Tyne Daly. I remember his daughter Martha, his wife, his late wife,
Sarah.
Paul
Winfield.
Paul.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. You know what? I'm picturing us on the bus. It was a bus tour. I had never been on a bus and truck tour. This was a bus tour through East Germany in the summertime. We went from city to city on a bus with a bus driver and an interpreter.
Yes.
A very sallow young man, if I remember, very kind of pale.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of. Who else? Who else was
Audra
there?
Lindley.
I'm sorry?
Audra Lindley.
Was
she
Audra
with?
there?
Was she with us, or was that Soviet Union? I can't remember.
It may have been Soviet Union. I don't think she was on that one. I see faces and names are not coming.
But the major players,
right,
are the ones that you've mentioned.
Right.
We had some horrific experiences. I remember going to Buchenwald and seeing the ovens.
Right. I remember, yes, I do remember that. That was
Oh, I remember we went to the Berliner Ensemble. We saw a performance.
Yes.
And you and I were talking to an actress. And we were talking about our careers. And I said, and Janet does commercials. And she said, what are commercials?
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes. I remember that we met with the actors. That first we saw a rehearsal. Or was it a class? I think it might have been. I can't remember. At any rate, we saw the actors working or rehearsing, and then we talked with them as part of the official group meeting. You know, we had many community meetings, which was the GDR sponsored part of the tour, and they were very interested in how we functioned as actors and artists in the United States.
Freelancers.
And freelancers, as opposed to how they functioned as state-sponsored artists who were employed practically for life and who were given the freedom of 6 months rehearsal to do a play. We found that amazing. I also remember that was it there? I believe it was, yes, it was. That was in Berlin, right? Because we went to so many cities. That was in Berlin, and I remember going to one of the actors' homes one evening after we were released from official duty, going to a party. Were you there?
I think so.
We went to a party and we met a lot of other actors, and we were able finally to frankly talk because we were not on display. We didn't have to represent our country, and they did not have to represent their political persuasion. And we all sat around drinking a lot of German wine and talking about how we really felt. And I think that was one of the few times that the sound of the language didn't bother me. The sound of German
hard,
was
guttural,
was just it was really hard for me. It was a lot of conditioned responses. A lot of my friends in New York were Jewish, and their parents were rabidly anti-German. And so I just developed this out of my own associations. So when I got to Germany and I was surrounded by this language, it was almost more than I could deal with. But when we were talking in such a casual social situation,
Then it was artist to artist.
then it was artist to artist, and it was great. I remember going to, do you remember going to Bautzen?
Yes.
Bautzen is a little tiny town outside of what? Was it outside of Leipzig?
I believe
I don't
so.
even know where it was. You know, my sense of geography is so bad.
I'd have to look at a map, but
I would have to do that.
Leipzig was an industrial
Yes.
town with smog, I remember.
Yeah.
And Bautzen, I think, was outside that.
I think it was. I'm not really sure, but it was a very old town with very old walls, churches, buildings, cobbled streets. And I remember that in our preparation for visiting Bautzen, we were told that it was the only city in East Germany where there was an existing indigenous ethnic minority. Do you remember that?
I remember that. I was shocked.
And it turned out to have been a Slavic minority of some sort. But the town was bicultural in that so many of the town celebrations had to do with the other groups' presentations, music, dance, costume,
They were
food.
actually allowed to speak their language.
They were allowed to speak their own language, and so there was this interesting thing about visiting Bautzen. Well, I had an experience in Bautzen that had to do with one day wandering into the huge church, the cathedral, and what it was, the church shared its premises with 2 or 3 of the town's different religious sects. They just sort of, you have it from 10 to 12, and I have it from 12 to 2, and what have you. And there was this sharing involved. And it was the only place that I can remember not feeling as if I was being stared at. And I fell in love with Bautzen. And I remembered not wanting to leave. Do you remember that?
Yes.
I think this was also toward the end of the trip. And I had already been away from home a month before I joined up with you, because I had been touring Europe on my own. I was by myself. And my daughter was back at home. And so I think I was coming to the end of my rope.
You know what I remember about that church?
It was
there
gorgeous.
were steps leading up, and the steps were sort of dented, worn, and people, I don't know which religious organization it was or which church, but they used to go up those stairs on their knees, and the stairs were worn, and they were made of stone, I believe.
Right. That's how old. That's how
well,
old it was.
we saw buildings that were hundreds of years
Hundreds
old.
of years old. And
There's
of course,
nothing that old in Los Angeles.
No, not at all. And the music. I mean, at any time of day that you went in there, there was a musician playing, and I remember being able just to go in and sit for a few minutes and listening. It was a wonderful experience, and I had. And we were only there a couple of days.
Yes. Do you remember the children's theater that we went to? I think it was outside Dresden. And on the bus, I asked, what was that house where this performance went on?
Mm-hmm.
And the woman who gave me the answer, said, it was the home of a capitalist.
Capitalist in East Germany. Right. Right.
But theater was for everybody.
Theater was for everybody. Everybody was encouraged, more than encouraged, to attend and to participate. I remember when we went to the movie studio, and they were told that there were town councils that sat in on sessions with the producers and critiqued the script and could make decisions about whether or not this script was going to be produced or could request changes. And we were shocked. People, ordinary people, factory workers, farmers, what have you, had a say because the subject matter was so carefully scrutinized, There were so many things that were not permitted to be said. I still have the posters that I got there.
Mine are still up in the house.
Yeah.
I still have them hanging.
That's true. That's true.
Do you remember we were on a bus, and I can't remember what city, I think Leipzig, and George Stanford Brown said, it smells like barbecue, and we ended up going to Kurt Masur's home.
Yes.
The composer, who had a Japanese wife, I believe.
He did.
And he
He's
had
a
this
conductor.
wonderful collection of jazz.
He had an extraordinary collection. He was one of the few residents who were permitted to travel.
And he spoke English.
And he
well.
spoke English. I remember one of the things that the actors were saying was that they were not permitted to travel outside of East Germany, so that they could not have an experience of actors in another country and another culture. And so they were feeling hemmed in and hampered by that. But Kurt Masur was permitted to travel because he was an internationally sought-after conductor.
I believe he's now living on the East Coast.
I think he is somewhere.
Yeah. Also, the woman with the Berliner Ensemble who asked about commercials was allowed to travel out once.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
But anyway, I want to get back to
Sure.
our friend Norma. What do you remember about our relationship with Norma, the three of us?
I remember a lot. I think we became really strong friends. We, in terms of hammering out an agenda based on how we all thought and what we all wanted and what our committees wanted, we pretty much did not have too many arguments.
I
if
don't
I remember.
recall any.
I don't think we had any major differences of opinion.
What I remember about Norma is that she was more politically astute than I was.
Absolutely.
I learned a lot from her.
Yes. Yes, she was. She was extremely well-read. Howard was an extraordinary person. He was very politically aware.
Because he had been blacklisted.
He had been blacklisted. He was artistically aware in ways that I necessarily wasn't, I learned a lot from Norma and Howard.
I loved going to their home
I did too.
and listening to him.
Yes, yes. I remember his office where he worked was the cave. I remember, seeing that and really just being extraordinarily impressed by how he had set up his whole work situation, in his work environment as a writer. I remember that we functioned extremely well together, and with Kathleen. And we were also aware of how much pressure Kathleen was under, how much criticism she was receiving.
She was the first woman president of the Screen Actors Guild. Being on the board hurt your career because of the confrontations we had in the industry?
I think what we all talked about and became aware of was the kind of damage that was being done to our careers because of our visibility with studio and network heads, and our confrontations, our face-to-face confrontations.
We were
over
taking
our
lots of
meetings. We were
meetings.
taking lots of meetings, and lots of first-time meetings,
Yes.
first-time cooperative meetings. I think we got the cooperation of the Writers Guild and the Directors Guild.
Yes.
For the first time, in terms of this issue of reporting and this issue of portraying realistically the American scene. I don't remember how euphemistically they...
In 1976, the American scene language went into the contracts.
Yes.
And by 79, we started gathering statistics.
Yes.
I think we were powerful, the three of us in the boardroom.
I think we were.
I think people, if they weren't afraid, they certainly respected us.
Yes. I think what we realized that we had to do also was make our agenda palatable to the board that didn't understand what we were talking about, particularly in terms of women. They understood minorities, but they didn't understand women, the women issue, and that we actually devised our own strategy. We realized that we had to be very charming, that we had to, woo our people to our side.
Like a Bernie Casey.
Yes, exactly.
And others on the Ethnic Minorities Committee.
On the board, right.
Yes.
Right. So we really did a lot of good groundwork and got a lot of results and felt a lot of adverse results on the outside. I remember that we had a very major meeting with networks, and that we were maybe a little cocky and
Maybe.
and that we were very open and outspoken about what our issues and what our problems were and what their lack of response we characterized in certain kinds of ways. And I remember not long after that, I had auditioned for a pilot and was being taken to network for this pilot. And I went to network, and there were two of the network execs that we had sat across the table with. And I remember looking into the coldest, deadest eyes, and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I remember that was the first time that it occurred to me that it could affect me, even though I already knew that it was affecting Kathleen. Kathleen was really having a very hard time, was really taking a lot of abuse.
And then you went on the negotiating team.
Right.
Was on the negotiating team
That's
for
true.
the TV theatrical
Right.
negotiation,
Right.
where we went on strike for a long time.
Yes. We went on a major strike in 1980, I remember.
We were very strong there.
We were. Yes, we were.
That was my second negotiating experience, but my first time at something that awful and stressful.
Right.
We were negotiating round the clock.
I also became aware of, well, I had always been aware of how people other than actors view us as actors. That that we're usually treated as a necessary nuisance by executives, producers, you know, all the behind camera crew. And by the public in general. We were spoiled brats and lazy bums, and you know, I mean, nobody ever took what we do for a living as being serious and as being hard work. It just looks as if it's so easy. Our lifestyle is, you know, and this was 20 years ago. You know, I mean, let's face it. Right now, it's even worse. I mean, right now it's horrendous.
But I remember the coverage, the television coverage, news coverage of us on the picket line, because we had lots of picket lines in those days, and it was about how Hollywood we were, what we were wearing, and it wasn't
and
about
what
the
were
issues.
we asking for?
Yeah.
For goodness sakes, you know. No, so I mean, I was certainly aware of that, but in that negotiating, sitting in the room, I realized that we were a bunch of actors facing an army of lawyers. And that was very chilling.
In the olden days, it used to be actors negotiating with producers who'd actually been on a set.
Right.
Now we were talking to lawyers who were representing multinationals.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
What did you learn from that?
I learned that I wasn't ready for that. I learned that I wasn't prepared to give up more of my my life, my time, for what I considered an unfair battle. And I learned how much it took out of me and how much it affected my relationship with my daughter. I began to realize that all the time, and sometimes it was 10, 12 hours a day that I was spending on SAG business was 10 or 12 hours a day that I wasn't spending with my child.
So 12 hours a day spent on SAG business, and you had a daughter at home wondering where mom is?
I'm not really sure what she was thinking about at the time. I mean, I felt, it's so insidious, all of this, because it just creeps up on you. You know, what Norma had promised me in 1976 was going to be just a couple hours a month. And then what Kathleen and Norma said, well, you know, there is an opening in the board. Can we put you in, and it'll just be 5 hours a month, became more than a full-time job, and became sort of the focus of my attention. I mean, if for instance I get up in the morning and say, what am I going to do today, or what do I have on my schedule today, it was mostly, you know, what time do I have to get to SAG, who are we meeting with, or what's the issue, what research should I have done, who do we, you know, what do we need to, instead of where's my next audition, where's my class, what do I need to do. The whole priority got skewed somehow. And in terms of my daughter, it was about, okay, she's in school. When she comes out of school, she's got this activity or that activity, and we've got this carpool to take care of it. And then I had a full-time housekeeper. So she was not home alone, and I would call her. We didn't have cell phones at the time. But I'd call her, or she knew where I was. but I just was exhausted.
I remember once our having a conversation about the amount of paper we were amassing.
Yes. Yes. The number of files that were accumulating, the kind of paper that, I'm sure I still have some of those files because I'm a classic pack rat.
Me too.
And I don't like throwing anything away, particularly files that meant something when I was putting them together. It's something that I keep postponing having to purge, okay? But yes, I know we had that, and I don't think I paid attention to the decline in my work. Now, I have to say also that period of time, the 80s were, the end of the 70s and the 80s, there were fewer opportunities for black actors and actresses in television and in film, as opposed to the late 60s. That whole decade from the late 60s to the late 70s, when the whole civil rights movement fell apart, broke down, was killed off, the corresponding movement to inclusion died out. So there was less work available to me at the time, and fewer, big opportunities to do significant work.
You mentioned you went in and these TV execs were looking at you with cold eyes. Do you think you would have been a megastar if you hadn't been involved in SAG?
What? I don't understand. I don't understand what that means exactly. But I think I don't know, quite frankly. Because what I know now is how much one's personal belief system and belief in self determines one's success in the outside world. That one's success on the inside determines one's success on the outside. And what I remember is that when people would come at me and say, "Oh, you're a star, you're a movie star," I would keep denying it. I am not a star. To me, a star meant something really very particular, and I was not a star. I was an actor. I was a successful actor. I was a known actor, but I wasn't a, quote, star. It seemed to me that the word star was being tossed about so that it started to mean less and less.
Would star be synonymous with white actor?
Well, there were very few black stars. I mean, we had Sidney Poitier, we had Harry Belafonte, we had Cicely Tyson was considered a star. I would have considered a star. I considered a star someone who consistently did starring roles. That's what it was supposed to mean, do you know?
But to me, you were always a star.
Really?
Yes. Oh, yes.
I didn't know that. I could have used that to my advantage had I
I didn't
known.
want it to go to your head.
I
had to
didn't know
live
that.
with you.
I mean, I did not see myself that way because I did not consistently get starring roles. What I got were co-starring roles. I got guest starring roles.
Yes.
I was the series regular's girlfriend. I was the pivotal secondary storyline character. But I wasn't. Nobody was racing after me to star in a movie. How many did I do? I didn't star in Sound It. Cicely starred in Sound It.
Yes.
I wanted Cicely's role, and he didn't give it to me. But so no, I didn't. I didn't consider myself that, and I didn't want that kind of attention. I really didn't want that kind of attention.
Now that you have gone through recovery from being absent from Screen Actors Guild and its committees, what's going on with your career now? You're no longer an ingenue.
No, I'm not.
But you're working still.
I'm working still, working a little. The interesting thing is that along with not ever considering myself a star, I also realized that I will be working until the day I die.
Good.
However much, however frequently, whatever, that I am in a career where I can work for as long as I can stand up and speak. I don't even have to remember anything, just as long as I can read. But several years ago, and I can't remember exactly when, this is when my memory starts getting, a little flaky. I got sick and I started having some physical problems that I was not expecting. And they mostly had to do with body pain and what have you. They were fortunately not life-threatening. They were just lifestyle problems, stamina problems. My stamina was depleted. My body pain. I wasn't able. I used to go to the gym every day. I used to work out. I used to take that. Couldn't do that. That was starting to become a problem. So some other issues. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, God, I really would love to have a job where I did not have to be on camera, where I did not have to have that kind of push to, to be on, to get it up, to get there, but still to be able to work in the industry. And I had been thinking about voiceovers, which was an arena that was never open to me. Instead, I became a dialogue coach.
How did that happen?
I don't know.
You must have known somebody.
I did. I knew somebody. I knew an actor who became a writer, who became a dialogue coach, who called me because he knew of a show, a black show, that needed a black dialogue coach, and there weren't that many around at the time. And it was Hanging with Mr. Cooper. And so I said, sure, I've never done it before, but I know what they do, and I'll do that. So I was with that show for a year, and that's a Warner Brothers show. And the studio execs with the show included some black studio execs who remembered me, said that the next time an opportunity came up, they called me. So I ended up doing 3 shows, one just for a few weeks, I remember, and sitcoms. I was called in to do Robert Townsend's show, Parenthood, in their 2nd season, to work with the children. And they had 2 precocious little children, and I worked with that show for the next 3 years. And watched those children grow up and discovered that I was really good at what I did. I was really good at working with children.
So that training as a child psychologist has come around full circle.
I guess it did come in
Really
handy.
came
How
back.
about that? Yes,
Yeah.
it comes full circle. It comes full circle. And so I did that for a while. I did that for those 3 years. And I've coached, I've coached children and I've coached adults. I've been offered teaching, and I realized I don't want to teach.
Really?
I guess maybe it's my personal view of what a teacher is or supposed to be, and that I just didn't feel I had the stamina to do it, or the discipline, or the interest to be consistent, that I'd much rather work with one person on one role and help them find what they needed to find in that one role than try to work with a group of people in theory. At least that's the way it comes down for me. I did a play. I did Hamlet. I finally got to play Gertrude.
Ooh.
Along with a bunch of other characters. It was a 6-character production of Hamlet. 6-actor production, where each actor, except for Hamlet, played several different roles. And it was grueling, and I got very sick. I got pneumonia on that show. It was amazing, but I did get to play Gertrude, which was something that I'd always wanted to do.
But
and
you have an Emmy Award, you have an NAACP award. Acting is still in your blood, though, isn't it?
I guess it is. I don't know. You know, I can't conceive of anything else that I could do or want to do, but I'm not consumed with the need to perform. I wish I was, you know. I know I need always to have some creative expression available to me, some form of creative expression. I've taken art classes that I've enjoyed. I started taking poetry classes that I enjoy, that I may go back to. But I'm really not possessed. I mean, when I read articles about actors, particularly actors that I admire, or I see documentaries about actors that I admire, or artists, painters, or writers, and I hear the passion and the involvement and the need to express in that art form. When I saw Pollock, I thought, I'm nowhere near an artist. I can't talk about myself as an artist, or in any way as expressing some art form, which is acting, because acting is a craft, we know that. Some people are much more talented about it than others. Some people are actually possessed by the need to perform, to create a character, to work. I'm not. I love it. I don't think I'm never happier than when I'm working on a set. I mean, I don't notice time. I don't notice problems anymore. You know, problems on a set no longer affect me the way they did. You know, I'm not necessarily involved in it. I absolutely adore being there, and I love everybody's contribution to the project, and I love camera work as opposed to stage work. I love the difference every day. Every day you go in, you're doing something different, as opposed to in the theater, going every night to do the same thing. I think would make me crazy after a year. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But on the other hand, I've never been in a long run of a play, and I've never been in a long run of a series. So how do I know? I can only judge by my own experience.
You know what I'd like to do is go back to your so-called community service.
Okay.
You did involve yourself with the Academy, TV Academy.
The Television Academy, I did.
And serve on committee.
I served on several committees. And even after I no longer had a seat on the board, I chaired the membership committee for 5 years, presenting the full membership meeting every year, making sure that each peer group was properly informed. I mean, all the technical management, administrative issues having to do with membership and membership issues. I also had been invited to be a member of a committee of the Motion Picture Academy Foundation, the Grants Committee. And I have been on that committee for easily 15 years. Easily.
Good.
Because after 9 years of service, you have to step off for a year to come back. So I've been a member, and now mostly I chair the committee now. When my turn to come off, somebody else will chair, and then I will co-chair. So, that's my committee experience right now. I was on the SAG Dale Scholarship Committee for a while, and I think what had happened was, at that time I was sitting on several other committees, and all of a sudden I found myself back in that same place of being over-committed. I mean, I had just more than I wanted to have, I think essentially I'm kind of a lazy person.
No.
I do. I think that essentially that my idea of a great time is lying down with a book, is, that's my idea of a really terrific time.
I don't think your involvement with Brock and Dee Dee Peters on Communications Bridge showed a lazy person to me.
You're right. You're absolutely right. See, but that's what happens. I get asked into something, and it begins to take over my life.
What was the Communications Bridge?
Communications Bridge was the training arm of a nonprofit corporation that Brock and Dee Dee Peters had developed. And this came after our participating in the Media Forum, which was a group of black professionals in the industry, not only actors, but writers, directors, producers, network executives, whatever, we were running informational seminars for the minority communities. And to fundraise for this nonprofit organization, a group of us formed a poetry reading group, and we used to travel mostly in San Francisco, Sacramento, San Diego, Los Angeles area for black political groups, other nonprofit organizations, people that would pay us, that would give us a fee to come and present poetry readings. And that led to an offer by KCET to produce our poetry reading for PBS, and we did, and that's where the Emmy came from. We were given an Emmy for the presentation of black poetry readings, which was wonderful. Okay, so out of that also, Brock and Dee Dee had this organization in which they wanted to train disadvantaged youth, mostly minority, in television production, video production, and to train and place in jobs. We began that went to work with them on that in 1982, and I left in 87. So that was 5 years that I put in there.
That was nearly a full-time job, as I
That was
recall. You
that was
were
more than a
very
full-time
involved.
job. It was extraordinary. It was constant and relentless. I mean, once the money started coming in, once the fundraising started, and then the programs started developing, and then we had to fulfill a lot of governmental requirements, and there was the political system to satisfy, and I mean, it just grew. I mean, like Topsy, it just mushroomed, and all of a sudden there I was, enveloped once more in something that took my total time and attention. I think I've never been able to figure out how to parcel out my time. You know, the only way I can do it is to say, that's it, I'm not doing it anymore, until the next thing comes up, and then it starts to grow and bubble, and then I have to put a stop to it. I think that so yes, I mean, I have served in a lot of committees, on a lot of boards. All of which to satisfy my wanting to do something for my community, whether it be my work community or my ethnic community.
After having done all that, will it be on your tombstone that you made a difference?
I would like to think so, because it doesn't seem so.
Ooh.
It seems as if what we did 20 some odd years ago still needs to be done today. It's as if we're right back to square one.
So
It's
then,
like reinventing the wheel.
here's the test.
Tell me.
Your daughter is now an actor.
Yes.
What do you see for her as a performer, as a professional in this industry?
I see for her more problems than I had. And the reason is that I happened to be in the right place at the right time. When doors were forced open, I happened to be standing right there, and I was asked in. On the other hand, when doors were closed, I was right there, and I was asked out, in a sense, you know, not totally, but in a sense. My daughter, on the other hand, comes up at a time when the stereotype for her age group was really something that she couldn't deal with and didn't want to deal with.
What is that stereotype?
You know, the hooker mentality,
Still?
Still?
Mm-hmm.
Of course. Don't you know? Don't you what? When she came out of Theater Academy, and her first agent was in commercials, and so she had really a thriving career in commercials, and still has. Her theatrical career, she's done a couple of movies. She's done several television shows. She recurs in a very small role on a very popular show now. But most of the roles that she asks to audition for are roles that she just doesn't want to do. The ethnic stereotyping is beyond her. The language, the attitude, the street talk, the sexuality, the promiscuity, all of those things that she that does not make her comfortable at all. She doesn't deal with. And because she also has never suffered in her life. She doesn't.
So then, having said that,
She
Janet
doesn't see the
MacLachlan,
need to have to pay her dues.
So after having done all of that, working on the boards and working with the children and all of our committee work, would you now bring yourself back or Samantha?
I'll make her do it. It's her turn. She needs to do it. Absolutely.
Samantha, we need
She
you.
needs to do it. She needs to participate, but she also needs to understand and find her niche in her industry.
You are helping her.
I'm
Or
trying.
does she listen?
She listens sometimes, but not all the time. It's hard, and I try not to overwhelm her with, even though she had. I blush with shame. She had an audition this morning, and as I was dressing to come here, and she was dressing to go on her audition, and we, were saying good luck and have a good time, blah, blah, blah. And I got in the car, and I thought, I have to give her a note on the scene. And so I called her from my cell phone, she was still home, to give her a note on how to play the audition scene. But she's okay about that. There was a time when she wouldn't even accept that, and I would have to find another coach for her because she wouldn't take it from me. It's interesting. But, so she'll, ultimately she'll do what she wants to do. Do you know what I'm saying? Ultimately, that's kind of what we did. We did what we wanted to do. We did what felt right and good. And when it stopped feeling right and good for me, I stopped. That's the thing.
Well, I think that you've gone full circle. Things haven't changed all that much. We need
Have
some
they?
young blood around here. So
We do, definitely.
Get Samantha
We'll
down
need to
the
get
Screen Actors
Sam
Guild.
and her friends
Yes.
down here and make them go through it. Absolutely, they have to, because they have to participate, they have to give back, and they have to have another kind of understanding. But you're saying to me as if it's not true that things haven't changed much. Have they?
Not a whole lot. The last
That's true.
audition I had was a shopkeeper and his wife speaking in Chinese or arguing in Chinese, and I was to hold a meat cleaver. And I told the casting director, there's no one here at this audition who speaks Chinese. Back to square one. So Janet
true.
MacLachlan, maybe we didn't accomplish that much, but we sure had fun.
Well, we at least, I have to say, we at least wrote the map.
We sure did.
And the next generation of people can come along and follow the map or not. But at least it's there.
Well, I thank you so much
Thank you.
for being on this legacy tape for the Screen Actors Guild Foundation.
Right. Okay, where does this tape go, by the way? Into
In
a
the
time
archives
capsule?
so that people can come back and see what Janet MacLachlan did.
Yeah, who I really was.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sumi.